Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross, and I'm the founder at designcuts.com. And this week, I'm joined by American retro design expert Dustin Lee and the incredibly talented South African illustrator Lisa Glantz. This week, we're joined by Lauren Hom, who is a huge inspiration for many in the creative community. Lauren does wonderful lettering work and has designed for clients like Starbucks, Google, AT&T, YouTube, and Time magazine. She's also released a book, several courses, including the popular Passion to Paid, and releases weekly HOMwork for her followers, which encourages them to think outside the box and get creative. I've been following along with the series myself, and it is super inspiring and fun. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Hey, Lauren.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you on. I mean, for everyone listening who's just caught the intro there, you sound like a very, very busy lady, I have to say.
Extremely. I don't know how you do it. How are you balancing all this
It's impressive.
Yeah.
That is true. I think that balance, I don't know if I would say I'm balanced. I was joking with my friends the other day. I just have a higher threshold, I think, I've always just been like busy, and I like to have a lot of things going on at once, but I don't think that busy is a bad thing. And I feel like the idea of, work-life balance being completely 50-50 is very difficult to achieve for a creative person. And then like a creative entrepreneur on top of that, like forget about it.
Yeah, so true.
Yes.
There's so much I'd love to pick your brain about today, Lauren, but I guess as a starting point, for anyone who knows you, I'm sure they're thinking the same thing. How do you fit it all in? How do you juggle all this stuff? Could you maybe share what a typical day for you looks like?
Oh, wow.
Just to really put you on the spot.
Absolutely. I mean, for the most part, of course, a lot is going on, but my day-to-day is hectic from a work standpoint, but pretty quiet. Like I work from home. I do have a offsite studio that I go to sometimes when I do need to get out of the house. But for the most part, wake up, make some coffee, make some breakfast, and then answer emails. I'm terrible with email. For anyone who's listening who hasn't gotten a response from me, I apologize. And then I'll jump into whatever freelance work that I have. I'd say that the bulk of the work that I do tends to be either editorial or advertising. I've been doing a little more work for like social media and digital stuff now, but there's really no typical day, because I could have a week where I work 80 hours and then I could have a week where it's pretty dead. And it was just something that took a while to get used to, and, to not have that kind of consistent stream. Obviously, now that I teach courses, and I'm running the HOMwork challenge, there's always more stuff for me to be working on when I don't have client work. But to answer your question a little bit from the beginning, I recently, I think in the last, I was going to say 4.5 years ago, when I decided to go freelance, I actually landed an agent right before. So I've had an illustration agent my entire full-time freelance lifespan, and that's been super helpful. I don't know if I could do everything that I'm doing now if I didn't have someone who was vetting my projects and negotiating for me and sending all the paperwork and following up on invoices. I feel like a lot of people who haven't gone freelance yet but want to gravely underestimate how long the admin takes. And so I'm so grateful for him. And then, so I've been with them the entire time. Satellite Office is the agency. And then 2 years ago, I hired a business coach. And then 1 year ago, I started hiring a couple of my girlfriends to help me with little admin tasks here and there, like helping me post homework features to my Instagram story and kind of skimming through my Instagram DMs to make sure I don't miss anything, just because the influx of communication now, we were talking a little bit about this before, overwhelms me. And I just have to figure out better ways to manage it, because I don't think it's going to get any smaller or stop. And it's a good problem to have, that you're in demand and that people want to chat with you and that you're getting invitations to speak and be on podcasts. But yeah, as a single person operation, it's very hard to keep up with that. And I think scaling my business is something that I never really thought about, because I thought I would just freelance forever and that would be my only source of income and the only thing that I did. And it's really expanded in the last couple of years, and no one really prepared me on how to deal with that expansion.
Well, I think when it goes like a rocket, you just have to hold on for dear life and try not to screw it up, right?
It's exciting, yeah.
Good for you there.
Lauren, can I ask you, I know what I like about your work, but I'm curious, what do you think is the thing that draws so many people to your work? Like, in your own opinion, what do you think it is about it?
In my opinion, I think, I'm a hand lettering artist. People know me as that, but I actually think that my lettering is not like the star of the show. I think I'm a decent letterer. I'm not trying to be self-deprecating, but I do think, I was talking with Tom earlier, I come from an advertising background. I think that my concepts and my ideas and my, I guess you could say it's a mix of copywriting and just, creative ideas behind my projects and behind the pieces that I do, are the thing that has helped me stand out and the thing that kind of has fostered such a big following. Because I feel like the thing that people ask me the most is, how do I stand out now that hand lettering has gotten so much more popular since I started 5 years ago. I feel like I got in at like the perfect time. But I was talking with Jessica Hish about when she started, and she said, she started maybe 5 years before I did, 6 years. Like no one was really doing it at the scale that it's at now. And definitely seeing people like her and Dana Tanamachi and like John Contino when I was a student making full careers out of lettering kind of gave me hope that I could do that too. And I feel like now there's just so many more. Like that expansion has, doubled or tripled since I started. I think that it's the concepts. I like to go back to my very first project, or the thing that catapulted me into lettering in the first place was while I was still in school, I launched a hand lettering project called Daily Dishonesty. I don't know if anyone who's listening is familiar with it. This is October 2012.
It's really good. It's a blog and a book, right?
It is. Yeah. It started as a Tumblr blog, and then it just amassed this huge following. And why I think my concepts are the thing that has sold my work through over the last 5 years or 6 years is when I started Daily Dishonesty, I had almost no hand lettering experience. I obviously was in art school, so I had design sensibilities. I had taken a typography course, but really no practice with hand lettering. So if you look through the archives of Daily Dishonesty, my work wasn't technically good. There's so much that was wrong with it. But because the concept was funny and I had packaged it up, I gave the project a name, I made it a website, I really turned it into like its own little thing. It kind of took off on the internet. And I realized after that, it was kind of an accidental success. I was like, oh, maybe there's power in coming up with my own little ideas and putting them out on the internet, combined with lettering and seeing if that gets traction. And it turned out to be true. So I do think that people enjoy my work for the creativity more so. I wouldn't say more so, I'm not sure, than the lettering. I think it's a mix of my personality and ideas, but I don't know. I'm sure it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's also that you have something to say, that you have a point of view. And I think a lot of maybe some letterers don't necessarily go down that road. So the fact that you actually, you're giving your opinion on life, essentially, I think that's really appealing to most people.
Thank you.
I've had your Instagram open this time, and I clicked on a random design, and and it says sassy and gassy.
Yes.
And then it says, just because she's cute, don't mean she don't toot.
Yes, I'm a big fan of rhymes.
I love that.
I remember hearing years ago, I forget, it wasn't even from an advertising teacher, that, the reason that advertising like jingles and slogans tend to rhyme is because they're sticky and people remember them. And I think that's a valuable thing to infuse into your work. So I never really realized I had a knack for it until people started pointing it out. But yeah, I like to write things that make me laugh, and then I put stuff out like that. And that's really, like, people always ask me about my strategy. My strategy is just to make work that me and my friends would get a hoot out of.
Lauren, how do you like,
that's awesome.
You had mentioned you have a background in advertising, and you mentioned copywriting. Can you like share a little bit of your copywriting process? Like, how do you fit that in, and how do you come up with your ideas for that? Because I can see how that would be so huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, when newer letterers come and ask me for advice, my number one thing is, if you want to stand out, learn how to write. And I think writing is such a daunting idea, especially if you're visually creative. Even though we can do all these amazing things visually, we tend to clam up when it comes to writing, because I think that we have this, and I definitely did too, this preconceived notion of what it means to write, when it really is just putting the same things that you would talk out of your mouth onto paper. I never really distilled my process until recently. It comes back down to what we used to do at the advertising agency. And I was only at the agency for, I think, 9 months. But the backstory of that is my partner and I, we got hired as a team. In advertising, you get hired as a copywriter and art director team. And the funny thing was we were both at the School of Visual Arts and both of us were art directors, but we didn't tell them that when we got hired. And so they assumed one of us was a copywriter. And when we told them after we got hired, they were like, oh, well, one of you is going to have to write. And my partner, English is not his first language. He spoke it fluently, but there's a lot of like nuance and like when it comes to writing taglines and of course. And so I was the default copywriter for that year. And I didn't really learn anything or get a formal training at the agency, but what we really do is just write down like the main topics of whatever we're trying to write about, and then I basically I'm a very visual person, so I have to write everything down, see all the words in front of me. I basically just do word association. So if I'm, writing about, let's use the sassy and gassy thing, I wanted to say something about, farts. I would write down fart on a piece of paper, and I would write down all the other words that just came up when I thought about it. Any experiences, feelings, like, anything, maybe like, what is it called? Synonyms. I'm a big user of like thesaurus.com and just looking up synonyms. I also use dictionary.com a lot and just look up, what are other ways to say this? You can use a rhyming dictionary. I think after doing that for a year, and we weren't really writing a ton of slogans, but the thing about advertising copywriting that definitely transferred over to my work is you have to get your point across in like as quickly as possible in the most concise way, because consumers don't have time to listen to a 10-minute commercial, and they don't have time to read a 4-line tagline. And I think, my process is really just writing down word associations, and then, I kid you not, just looking at them and being like, oh, those two kind of match, or this rhymes with this, and I could kind of combine it that way. I would do it. It's a very visual process for me. So that's how I write.
I love that.
Sounds amazing. Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed this, Lauren, but for me, the majority of the lettering world is probably lacking that writing skill. And so it will be a photo of some woods or a mountain off of unsplash.com.
Obviously,
like,
Unsplash.
Like inspire or something like that, written like a generic
adventure
word. Yeah, that kind of thing. And so that ends up becoming a sea of noise, which people develop a blindness to. And then I go on your content and it makes me laugh, like the example just there, or I resonate with it in some kind of way. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd imagine most of your audience are actually women.
I did actually look at the split. It's about 70% women, 30% men. Yes.
Yeah. So I figured it might resonate slightly more strongly, but as a guy, like, so much of it speaks to me as well. So it has that real human connection where it actually evokes an emotion.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe that's such a key that so many creatives are missing. And so much of that can be done with the language, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, my design sensibilities tend to skew more feminine. That's just my taste. And so I have attracted more of a female audience. But a lot of the like actual phrases or content that I'm lettering tend to be fairly gender neutral, even if the styling or the design aspect is a little bit more feminine. But yes, infusing, I think this is why like my strategy is making work that my friends and I would think is funny, or based around conversations that we've had, things that are relevant in my own life, because, if you speak from your personal experience, we're all human. We're going to be able to relate with something like farts or something like heartbreak or something, going to college, going grocery shopping, whatever it may be. I really have found that the sweet spot for me is the basis of a lot of my work is pretty mundane, like everyday things, just feelings or pretty normal things. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, is they feel like they need to make work about extraordinary topics. It's like, that's why you see so many of those Unsplash photos with, the big mountains or the beach, and it says adventure, and it's it's aspirational.
People are kind of sick of it, right? They're sick of Benji with his dreadlocks going kayaking through the Amazon. They don't care about that. They want Lauren, who's like in the grocery store being sarcastic or something.
Well, you definitely see it with like the rise of meme culture, and even before memes, like GIFs and stuff like that were just floating around the internet. things that talk about pretty mundane stuff is the kind of content that tends to get the most engagement, because it's, if you talk about farts, to not to bring up farts again, but I'm going to do it. That's something that every single person has encountered in their life, whether or not they think it's funny. And it's a very, very divided issue. But
I think it's hilarious.
But I mean, it's the point is that it's relatable, and I think that's the whole thing. And you want the audience to be able to interact with you through your work. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's what I try and do with mine. So that it's a key, because that is the whole point of creating is having that interaction with the audience and yourself without actually meeting them in a way. You're just doing it through your work, and I think if you don't get that right, I think that's when there's kind of like flatline. And you definitely, I mean, just whether it's through your copywriting or your art, you definitely have nailed that. There's no doubt about that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it definitely is. When like what you were saying about things falling flat, I think that it took me a while to find my stride too. Like when you're a younger designer and you've been following all of your design idols and you see all the projects they're working on and you see, just their work, you try to emulate that and you make the work that you think you should be making. But that's when it falls flat, because everyone else is also trying to make that work.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that I think it takes a little bit of, trial and error, and you have to come to that realization on your own, because every young designer eventually does, I think. But when you stop trying to make work that you think other people will like, or that you think is the work that's going to land you the big project, that's when you really find your stride, I think, as a designer. And it takes a little bit of, again, you have to learn, or you build up your confidence to be like, oh no, like I really can make work about the things that I like and things that show off parts of my personality. And then once you get a little bit of validation from that, I definitely did with my passion projects, then you're like, oh, I should do more of that. And then you dive deeper into that. I was actually on another podcast yesterday, and we were talking about, building up confidence in your work. And I was fairly lucky early because my very first passion project, Daily Dishonesty, was a smashing success when I launched it in college, and I got all of this external validation. Blogs were writing about my work. People were sharing it. People were reaching out to me for freelance work and interviews and all this stuff. And, it's not bad to want some of that external validation. It actually gives you confidence that, oh, this is me going in the right direction. And so I actually built my creative confidence kind of by accident and fairly early on, because I got so much of that validation from others sharing my work and telling me they loved it. Not just my parents or my best friends, but other people, strangers on the internet.
Exactly. And do you still have your days where you go, man, this looks like crap, or no one's going to like it? Or, I mean, do you still
even
have
imposter syndrome? That's what a lot of the listeners talk about, right? Imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely have the thoughts that pop up in my mind, but I can smash them pretty quickly. And I think one thing that helps with the imposter syndrome, again, back to my genius marketing strategy of just making work that you like, it helps me with the imposter syndrome if I'm making work that I love or I think is funny or I think is interesting, at a very base level, I'm still going to like it. And I feel like I'm doing the right thing. And I think, and because it's stuff that's coming completely from me and my point of view, I'm not really comparing it to what other people are doing. So I actually don't feel imposter syndrome as much as I used to, because I've kind of found that stride of making work that I genuinely enjoy making. And of course, technically there are times where I'll look at something and be like, oh, that didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, or it's a little bit off. But the pros greatly outweigh the cons when it comes to sharing imperfect work. I think that if I spent the time and I had an idea and I tried to execute it and it didn't turn out perfectly, there are times where I won't share something, but for the most part I do, because it's kind of what I do too, is I like to share all parts of my process, and I kind of like to show a little bit of behind the scenes that not everything you do is going to be perfect, and that's okay. No. Because the truth is, even my favorite, and there are times where the opposite thing happens, where I make something and then I get really cocky about it and I'm like, this is amazing. Everyone's going to love it. And it happens once in a while. But you really never know, because the internet, once you put something on the internet, you know, whether depending on what time you post it or who's seeing it, whatever the algorithm is doing that day, like you have very little control over how that post performs. I think that was one thing that kind of set me free too. Is I'll share this story. About 2 years ago, I was in Australia with my assistant, and we were painting this big mural. It took us 4 days, like full days of painting, and we finished it. And I took a photo of it, and I was so excited to share it because it was my biggest piece ever. I was like in love with it, and I thought to myself in the back of my mind, I was like, I think this is going to be my best performing Instagram post. I can just feel it, and I posted it, and it did okay. It did fine, and then the next day we went to the beach and like took a day off to reward ourselves. And I wrote the word Australia in the sand with my finger and took a picture of it by my feet. It took me 30 seconds. And I posted that, and it got double the amount of likes as my 4-day mural. And that was actually it was a really insightful like thing, because I was like, oh, you know, the amount of effort you put into something is not directly correlated to how much engagement you're going to get. And once I like broke free of that idea, it was so liberating, because you're like, well, it's, you know, it's not a complete crapshoot. Obviously, like you should put care and effort into your work, but there really isn't much you can do. The internet kind of has a mind of its own. Your audience, you never know. Like, so I think that once I released myself of that, it definitely was a lot better. But back to what I was saying about, you know, when I make work that I really love and I think it's going to do great, like even my favorite pieces, you know, I think back to 2015 or something, and my favorite piece that year, it's 2018 now, and I look back at that and I think it's a load of crap. And I think that was one thing that helped me too, is I was like, oh, most likely I'm going to hate whatever I make in a year or two. And so like it takes the pressure off, because it's going to be shit in a year or two.
Anyway,
so
exactly.
And it's a good thing, because it means you got better and your taste improved and your skills improved. And I mean, the best piece of advice I ever got, I wish I could remember who told it to me, was that the long way is the shortcut. And if you're going to if you want to have a creative career that spans, you know, 30, 40 years, it's going to take 30 or 40 years. You know, you're never going to get to this like point where you're like, I'm good. Like I've reached the peak of my career and I'm never going to get better. It's always a process.
Yeah. But that's what makes it fun, doesn't it? I mean, that's the whole point. That's why we do it. Yeah.
I love what you said about, because I've thought the same thing to myself. I'll look back at you know, products I've made or something, and think, oh, that is not my favorite thing that was ever done. And it's almost like we're living in naivety about things that we're not going to like in a few years. And it's so good for us that we live in that, because if we didn't, nothing would ever happen. Like if you had the foresight of 10 years, I mean, imagine if the people that were doing like stuff in the 80s, some of this stuff that's like kind of known as being tacky these days, which I think is cool. Like imagine if they had known that.
Yeah, the 70s furniture or something.
Yeah, it would have never happened, you know? So
absolutely.
No, and true.
Well, and like what you were saying about like the 80s or like the 70s, with, you know, things like art, music, fashion, trends like cycle through. And you know, what was considered a good like piece, like a good movie poster or a good album cover in the 80s is probably different than what it is now. And I think I realized that, I mean, again, if our careers are going to span, you know, 30 or 40 years, we're going to see all those cycles of, you know, design trends and aesthetic preferences, and, you know, even down to the food that we eat. Like there are definitely like food trends. No one was eating kale like 10 or 20 years ago. Well, some people were eating kale, I'm sure. They were like the OG kale eaters. But, you know, things, you know, due to marketing or due to whatever it may be, especially with social media now, I feel like trends catch on like wildfire. And yeah, I think it's up to us to evolve and adapt with that. And you, again, like the work that you make, even for me, I think it's about a year span where I still have things in my portfolio from a year or two ago, but usually not longer than that, because unless it was for a really huge client and I want to kind of keep that visible, you know, my work changed. I wouldn't say, actually my work gets better, but not necessarily like in a like linear way every year. I don't get 20% better every year. It just evolves. And maybe one year I get into, like this year I've been way more into cooking, and I haven't incorporated a ton of it into my work, but it definitely, like, you get new interests or you meet new people or you learn new things every year that will influence you as a person and as a designer. And you never know like which way it's gonna take you. I think that's like Lisa said, it's the exciting part of it.
What's interesting too is I feel like you had mentioned with your work, you really try to incorporate yourself and your life and your very specific outtake or look at very mundane things that we all experience. And that doesn't have an expiration date. Like that kind of stuff is always great to look at 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Everyone always relates to that,
That is very true. People are still going to be farting in 40 years.
Absolutely.
Well, they might have some futuristic invention.
Oh, you never know.
Oh my gosh. Wait, that just blew my mind.
So Lauren, I instantly know what a lot of the listeners are going to be thinking at this point. I'm sure they're going to find you as inspirational as we do, but I know the rut many of them feel in. It's that they're stuck. How do they stand out? How do they differentiate? How do they build a brand, make a name for themselves? I think you've dropped some knowledge bombs on this so far in terms of authenticity, keeping it real with your audience and not aspiring to be like someone else or chase trends, etc. But I would say that you are very much a brand. You're not just someone who happens to have nice lettering on their page. I look at you as a great example of creative branding. I think that's probably a huge reason why you are standing out, building a platform where you can, release all these fantastic projects. I think your history in advertising probably does, link heavily into that. But have you got any tips, any strategy? I kind of want to push you on the strategy side, rather than just saying, be yourself and put things out there. That's absolutely true. But I'd love to know some of the strategy.
If Ian was here, I'd want a step by step.
Yeah, our other co-host, he's always like, I need the exact steps, so I'm kind of filling in for him.
The formula, the recipe.
I know there's no formula, but like any kind of broad techniques or tips for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. Something like be yourself, be authentic is just about as broad as. I always feel the same way when I was younger, and when people would say, when it comes to pricing, charge your worth. Like, what is my worth? I don't know what my worth is.
It's like what your mum tells you for dating or something, isn't it? Just be yourself and smile. It's like, thanks, Mum.
Oh my goodness, yes. I think, let me think. For me, other than the kind of cut and dry tips of, having a website and curating your work, and maybe even, I guess, a simple tip is picking a color palette that you want to work with it. Not that you have to stick to forever, but I've stuck with the same colors because they're my favorite colors, the kind of teal and coral. I think that aesthetic sensibility, like with a consistency in aesthetic sensibility paired with a consistency in your personality, is a good kind of recipe for how to build a brand. Is if you're visually consistent and then topic-wise, point of view-wise, you are consistent there. I think that's a good starting point for building your brand. I think for me, again, back to the whole be yourself, but kind of breaking it down into more like actionable steps, taking your actual, like the things that you do outside of design, whether it's yoga or you like to cook or you like, mountain climbing, whatever it may be. I think that tapping into those and trying to combine them, trying to use your design skills to create work or projects around the things you do in your everyday life, like your interests, are a good way to start generating authentic work. And then potentially, if you're really into like climbing and you start making, you're designing climbing gear or t-shirts or, postcards of like the national parks or whatever it may be, you'll also start attracting clients who are in that space as well. So I think that, again, it's really this simple thing, but making work about the things that you're interested in, things about yourself, kind of checks all the boxes in terms of attracting followers, but also clients like who are into the things that you're into. I never really thought of myself as a brand until I realized I was. It was never an intentional thing. And I think, I didn't really realize I was a brand until I had put out about 4 or 5 of my passion projects. And even though they're all very different, like I was doing daily dishonesty. And then after that, I had a project called ex-boyfriend tears. They were just flasks that said ex-boyfriend tears on them because I went through a breakup. It was genuinely.
Was that you? Because I've seen those.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That was me. And, again, I went through a breakup. It wasn't fun, but I made work about what was going on in my life. And I created a product that basically, I wouldn't say solved a problem in my life, but poked fun at something I was going through. And like Justin was saying, those breakups are universal and they're timeless, and it's not a good thing, but we all have gone through heartbreak in some way. And so I think my work I've been able to build a brand and attract a wide audience because I do work. I combine my creative skills with the events and the interests like in my actual life. And that's really been my entire strategy. There hasn't really been any, like we were talking about this earlier, I don't have any like internet marketing hacks or like, social media like hacks. And honestly, I never really put too much weight in, people talk about Instagram strategy and replying to every comment and posting at a certain time in the day. And, I've read about those things before. I've had friends tell me about them, but I think that they, once the algorithm changes and it's changing constantly, like it's just too exhausting for me to keep up with. And so I choose to put most of my strategy in the content creation part of it, the concept and the styling and the design of it, more than the promotional strategy, I suppose.
Which is interesting because a lot of the time people struggle with this. I'll kind of say, well, it's not filled with dreams. It's not build it and they will come. A lot of the time you have to create, but that isn't enough. You need to really work to get your work out there and distribute it. But you're kind of saying the opposite. And I can see you're probably a great case study of how that has worked. And I guess it's just because you're so authentic and that authenticity is compelling. You're sharing your humanity with the world.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I've heard, I had a question come up in one of my classes the other day about how do you like cold call or cold email clients that you want to work with. And I actually was completely stumped on that because for the first time, I realized that I've never sent a cold email. I've never had to call people up because I've been fortunate enough that I've just had a stream of work coming in for the last 5.5 years. And I think that's very lucky.
Which is a really bad answer to give because they're like, oh, screw you.
I know, exactly. But I can break that down a little bit and talk about, again, my kind of reverse strategy of that. Because I do know people who send a massive amount of, emails, do client outreach, and it works. That's one way to handle it, is to make the work and then, promote it and to actually hustle and go send it out there and try to get it seen. But I prefer, I always call myself a lazy marketer. And it's worked really well for me because I can do less, which is amazing. And that's the power of the internet, is when I put all of my effort into digging deep, figuring out how can I combine my lettering and my art direction with what's going on in my life. Then I start to make these projects that are inherently super shareable. And when people share your work or they tag their friends in a comment on your Instagram posts or, take a screenshot and send it to their group text or, back in the day, forward it via email. Maybe people still do that. I think it's basically free marketing. People are sharing your work for you. You don't have to go out there and say, everyone look at this, or and it, there is some strategy. I'll talk about this. In my Passion to Pay class, we talk about actually not reaching out to clients, but sending your, not work, but passion projects, your fully formed passion projects out to design blogs and to websites to get featured. That is one thing that you can do to start to spread and circulate the work. But other than that, I've never cold emailed anybody because other people do it for me, basically. Especially when I forget what was it? I think it was called, there was a marketing book that I was reading about why things go viral. Shoot. Oh, it's called Contagious, I think. Oh. Yeah, it's great.
I knew Dustin would have it. Dustin must have.
He has every book.
He must have 5 libraries in his house. Every time we mention a book, he's like, I've got it right.
It's a great book. It's this guy holding it and he's looking up, if I recall correctly. Yeah,
it's an orange cover. So I forget, but yeah, and they were talking about how, but I wanted to bring it up because in the book, he talks about how word of mouth is honestly one of the oldest ways of marketing in the book, but it's one of the most tried and true because if I come up to you, like, and you don't know me and I say, hey, like, check this out. I made this and it's awesome. You know, you have no like trust with me. You don't really believe anything that I'm saying. Yeah. If your best friend or someone who's close to you says, hey, check this out, it's awesome, you're going to check it out. Because that kind of personal relationship and that equity you have built with that person is so valuable. And that's why word of mouth marketing always works.
Yeah.
So true.
I could totally reiterate that back to, for instance, something I recently gotten into is affiliate marketing for products. And, you know, that basically people that have followings are vouching for you to people who would otherwise not trust you. And it works so well because they don't know me and I have a dog in the fight, but the other person, you know, has their reputation on the line. And yeah, it's super powerful. I wanted to shift for a second if I could, because I love this so much about your work. The one I'm looking at right now is Will Letter for Lunch. And for people that can't obviously see it, whether listening to a podcast, essentially what you did, and correct me if I'm not completely understand, but I think this is what the idea was, is that I will do a chalkboard for you advertising one of your specials or something you're doing if you will give me that for lunch. And it was kind of like your great way of creating a portfolio of all this chalk work and at the same time having fun and at the same time getting delicious meals. I so want to do that. And I don't do that as much as I want to. Do you have any tips for making a, no pun intended, bite-sized project like that for yourself, like for other people?
Yeah, absolutely. Will Letter for Lunch is probably the project I get emailed about the most still to this day. I stopped doing it, I think, at the end of 2015, but I still get emails about it. Wow. It was a really simple project. I didn't invent bartering. Like, restaurants have been giving out food for a while. Like, people, especially in the food industry, barter for stuff. And people always ask me, how do you do it? And really I just combined something. Again, like, I had no chalk lettering portfolio, but it was something I had been interested in because at that time when I started the project, I had been doing, Daily Dishonesty. I got the book deal from that. I was getting a lot of client work, but specifically in that colorful 3D style. So basically just making Daily Dishonesty pieces, but with their copy. And I was making money from it. Everything was good. But, one of the curses of being creative is you get bored really fast. And I ended up feeling like, am I just going to be doing like this colorful dimensional lettering for the next 40 years? Like, I've mastered it already. I can do it really quickly. Like, I know how to do everything, the shading, the texture, and it's easy for me, but that doesn't mean it's fun or challenging. And so I was like, okay, what else can I do with lettering? And that's one thing that I think what I like about lettering is I can explore a lot of different mediums. The second you even change the surface you're lettering on, it becomes completely different. So that keeps me excited. But chalkboard lettering was kind of one thing that I had always looked at, and I had always thought in the back of my mind, like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, maybe I'll give that a try, and then never really let myself do it because I didn't have any of it in my portfolio, and I didn't really know how to get it other than to like wait for someone to maybe give me a project. But then I realized, like, oh no, like, if Daily Dishonesty catapulted me into all of this 3D dimensional colorful freelance work, could a chalkboard project catapult me into the exact same thing? And the answer was yes, it turned out to be. But with that in mind, that's kind of how I came up with the project. And again, that insight of this is what I want to do. How can I combine it with, how can I make a project about it? I had that in the back of my mind. And then I also love food. That's just a genuine interest of mine. And the idea just came to me one day when I was walking around looking for brunch with a friend, because everyone on Sunday puts out their A-frame board with all their specials, trying to entice you to come in, especially on all the busy avenues, like in whatever city you're in. And I started doing the project, and I didn't really know if anyone was going to say yes to me, but once they did, it snowballed after that. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to do a chalkboard in exchange for food at a restaurant. I think I've had a lot of friends who have worked at restaurants, and sometimes the manager will just ask you to do the chalkboard if you're the one with good handwriting, and you'll get like a free meal or something. It's not new, but to your question, Dustin, I think the ability to package it up into, again, a bite-sized project is what helps to sell ideas through. So tips as in like giving it a name, like coming up with a name for the project. If you have, $15 to spare, buy the URL. It can really, really help to make it look credible. I know that it's such a simple thing. And I teach this in my class and I get so many questions. They're like, do I really have to buy a URL? And the answer is no, you don't have to. You could just do a, willletterforlunch.tumblr.com or .blogspot.com, whatever free site you wanted to use. But as long as you need a home base for the project to live. It's relatively inexpensive to set up.
Lauren, super quick on that front.
Yes.
Something I've become obsessed with doing is buying domains and then forwarding them. Because I think people get scared of, you're like, get a domain, you're like, oh, but then I have to get hosting and set up a website, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
We did a webinar with Lisa recently. So I just went and bought lisaglanslive.com. And that looks more professional. Now you're shouting on social media, we're going to do this thing, go to Lisa Glans Live instead of go to designcuts/blah, blah, blah. It's more bite-sized. So that can work really well too.
That's really, really smart. Because I know everyone's working with a different budget. I probably own 15 or 20 like domain names. It's getting a little bit ridiculous at this point. But that is one simple way. Like if you've got, again, an extra $15 to spare to make your like passion project look more credible. So that, like what you said with like lisaglanslive.com, making your passion project, giving it a name, giving it like a place to live that isn't like homesweethom.com/willletterforlunch. It's okay to have that eventually in my portfolio. But I do think that I always launch my projects making them look like they're a bigger deal than they actually are. And I think that that's what a lot of branding and marketing is getting your ducks in a row and like making sure it looks polished before you like press play on it. And I think that's one of my best tips to make a passion project look more credible. In terms of making it bite-sized, I think my recipe is another food pun, is taking...
Just throw that into the mix. Sorry, gotta keep it going.
The recipe I've come up with is taking a goal that you want to achieve. So not like a big goal, like, I want to, be on this podcast someday. Like maybe it's like a skill that you want to hone, or like a thing like, I want to do food packaging. So you choose like a thing that you want to accomplish and then combine it with, one of your interests. And so again, with like with the copywriting exercise I was talking about, like I'm a very visual person. I like to write all these things down and see which ones might make interesting combinations, or, if it's, I would love to do chalkboard art someday, so that's chalkboard lettering as a skill. Like, and then I look at all of my interests. So I like, why it was funny. I was talking the other day with a friend. I feel like I don't have that many interests outside of design. And I think a lot of designers feel this way. But it ended up, chalkboard lettering. And I combined it with food and like restaurants because I genuinely like those things. And you could have combined chalkboard lettering though with a lot of other things, maybe for like a sporting event or for a boutique, like retail. Like there's a lot of other things it could have been combined with. And maybe it wouldn't have been Will Letter for Lunch. It would have been, bartering for something else and the name would have been slightly different, but I think it would have had a similar effect. And I was talking about this yesterday, but one thing that really helped to grow my audience and build my brand was Will Letter for Lunch was very pivotal because I captured two audiences at the same time. I captured restaurant lovers and food lovers and designers. And so it killed two birds with one stone in a way. And I think that's one kind of pitfall that a lot of designers fall into, especially letterers, is that you're only marketing to your peers. And that is, you're thinking way too small if you're only trying to appeal to other designers, because everybody out there is a valuable like member of your audience and could know somebody in another industry, or, what I saw happen with Will Letter for Lunch. I started booking paid like restaurant chalkboards, and then I started booking chalkboard murals, and then I started booking commercial chalk work. So it just slowly like grew and spread. And because I was, capturing people who were working in the restaurant industry who didn't really know anything about design, but enjoyed the project. And because it was about food, like they liked it, I booked a lot of work that way. And back to kind of what we were talking about, Destin, about word of mouth kind of like marketing. I remember I was working a job about 3 years ago for Propel, like that like fitness water. And I was doing like live lettering on site, like on these like tote bags. And the woman who hired me, I was like, oh, like, by the way, how did you find me? And she was like, oh, I just asked my roommate if she knew any hand letterers. And her roommate doesn't know me personally. Her roommate just follows me on Instagram. And,
Wow.
all it took was, she didn't even like vet anyone else or like ask anybody else. She was like, okay, I trust my roommate, and like she recommended this chick, so I'm just going to hire that chick. And it's really as simple as that.
So
It is.
yeah, you're totally right about word of mouth as well. And for the record, we're equally horrible at talking about pitching, because when we've been freelancing, we all survived on word of mouth too. I think in a few weeks, we're actually getting an expert on pitching on the show, because we're so sick of people asking us and not being able to answer it properly. So
it's tricky because, whenever people ask me about, freelancing and pricing and client outreach and kind of the actual like technical marketing stuff and like business stuff behind the scenes, I have like a understanding of what it is, but because I don't do a lot of it myself, I'm really not the like perfect person to ask about it. I like to know about these things, but it's also, like, because I don't, I think that for anyone who's listening who's like hates pitching their work or like, hates doing the paperwork, I have been able to find a way to outsource those things, again, through putting my, I guess, effort into the content and trying to make work that I love, but is also has a very shareable aspect to it. So I don't have to do any outreach. I don't have to pitch because people come to me. And then, getting my agent has been a game changer for me as well, because the only reason I can do things like HOMwork and Passion to Paid and, travel to go speak places is because I'm not bogged down in paperwork. So whether that means getting kind of an office assistant or a personal assistant or an admin, even if it's not an illustration agent, I think having help in those categories can be helpful.
Lauren, I so related when you said that you take forever to respond back to emails.
Oh, yes.
I can vouch for that.
Me too.
I literally put respond, like I do the same. I have Bench, this company in Canada, is my accounting for me. I have.
Oh my gosh, I use Bench too.
Do you? Yeah, they're great, aren't they? Because I won't do it. I simply won't do it. And then I have a CPA who does that because I won't do that.
Absolutely.
Email is another one of those things that's on the bottom of my list because I just have such a hard time processing email. Like, it exhausts me. Plus, like, I have kids and stuff. So I'm like, okay, that's my last priority. And as a result, I end up looking like flaky to people like Tom here, who doesn't get a response, even though I would name a child after Tom. I mean, Tom is fantastic, but I hate email. So I guess more than a question, this is validation. I find myself to be on those things I hate, extremely unorganized with it. Like, please tell me you're like that too. I feel like you're so put together, and I'm hoping that there's like this seam of like chaos that you're hiding.
I just want to have to make you feel better, man.
I can.
Like a lot of creatives are like that.
I can validate you there. I am super messy behind the scenes. My inbox is chaos. My desktop, like every time that I like bring my laptop to go present, like at a school or like a conference, like I make sure like I like put everything in a folder, like just like wipe it really clean, because my desktop is usually just a shit show. But yeah, it's
join the club.
I think organization is definitely not like my forte. I definitely still get a lot done, but the things that like email, like you were saying, that you drag your feet on. One of my goals for 2019 is to try to, really look at my business and figure out the things that I really, one, am bad at, or two, don't like to do, or find myself kind of pulling away from or procrastinating on, and figure out how to hire people to do those things for me. So I do give people answers in more, faster than a month later. And I think that's one thing too that I wish someone had told me earlier on, is like, you don't have to, even if, I'm my brand, I'm like Hom Sweet Hom is just me, like Lauren Hom. Just even if you're a freelancer and you're kind of running like a one-woman show, it doesn't mean you have to do everything by yourself. Like, my brand is me, but I have so much behind the scenes. Like, even sometimes I forget too, like when I'm talking with people, like, oh yeah, like my agent Ryan does a lot. And people always bulk at the fact that agents take between 25 and 30% usually of a commission from work that designers do. But I don't think I could even tally up the number of hours that they've saved me over the last 5 years. I would not be able to do everything that I do now without that. And so, yeah, it's chaos for me too, Dustin. Don't worry. But I think that one thing that I've had to work on is like identifying it when it's chaos and then like not letting it continue, which is why I'm trying to figure out ways to hire people. And it's tough too. Like when you're your own brand, hiring is not as simple because especially with communications. And I think that's why oftentimes, for me included, email is the last task to be outsourced because you don't want someone coming off as anything different than like exactly what you would say because someone's representing like you and your brand.
That's exactly it for me. I have freelancers, like I'm trying to like focus on my little bandwidth of things that I'm good at, which is very little. And then outsource the things that other people are strong at. And the last thing is the email because it's like my personal inbox. It's filled up with messages to me. And it's just so, I don't know. It's like having someone dig through the top drawer of my dresser or something. It's weird.
Yeah, for sure. Like I can talk a little bit, since this is the honest, designer show. What I haven't outsourced email yet, but I have outsourced my Instagram direct messages, not all of them. I've developed a system with one of my friends, Jess, who also helps me manage some of my courses. So one, I trust her deeply. So she's the only other person who has my Instagram password, which is kind of scary to think that anyone else has your Instagram password. But what we did was I realized over the years that there are, 20 pretty common messages that I get, asking for interviews or asking for, if I'm for hire or, just compliments or questions about this, or this. And I kind of went through them and I wrote her like scripts for how to answer like the most commonly asked questions. And obviously, they're tweakable and I try to have a little bit of variety. Like, if someone says, I love your work so much. Like, can you give what's your best tip for, someone who wants to get into lettering? I gave her like 2 or 3 options she could say.
So it's still your words, but it's scalable. And you're not doing the thing of like, thank you, first name, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a system that we came up with. And then the other thing we kind of had to work around though was, I don't want her responding to people that I have personal relationships with because it'll sound weird if it comes off as not me. So in the Instagram direct messages now, you can, I think, star or flag people that you're close with or that just messages you want to star. So I'll flag people that I personally know and I'll handle those, but she'll handle everything else. And that's been really, really helpful. And it's worked pretty well. I think one time I caught like a spelling error and I was like, no, but, I will fucking cut my losses. Like if that saves me 10 hours a week. Because honestly,
you delegate because you have to, right? You reach that point.
Yeah, otherwise you'll croak.
It sounds like you're killing it with a system, Lauren. Like maybe not right now, but I'd be happy to chat another time because I've had to do the same thing.
With me.
We now got a team of like 20 people. And
oh
so if you're interested in how it scales that next bit, like happy to share all the systems and whatnot. Because for me, I really struggled with that too. I really couldn't let go. And I really initially micromanaged, but like when you do it and do it properly, it's such a relief and it works so much better. It scales better.
I would love to chat with you about that after this interview. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was really helpful for me with the direct messages. And I think that one thing that has been hard with, honestly, the reason I ended up hiring Jess is because I started HOMwork like the 2nd or 3rd week of January this year. So it's been going on for like 47 weeks or something now. And I didn't really know what it was going to turn into. And ever since I started featuring people in my story and like doing the challenges and really engaging with people, my inbox, like the influx of messages I've gotten has been just too much for me to handle. And it got to the point where I think I was doing it myself for about 2.5 months. And my boyfriend had commented, he was like, you realize you've been on your phone like 3 hours straight, like responding to messages and like featuring people in your story. And that's not a good use of your time. And I was like, no, but it has to be me. It's not authentic if it's not coming from me. And he was like, you're basically doing like customer service, for your business. Like, he used a very extreme example. He was like, that would be the equivalent of Bill Gates, like doing Microsoft customer service, like answering questions about the products. Yeah. Or responding to every like piece of fan mail or whatever. And I was like, okay, like you're right. Like it really, he's like, you're actually doing a disservice to your audience by spending so much time doing menial tasks when you could be creating more art or making more courses or doing other things that would bring them more value over time than, pressing the little heart icon and responding to everyone's Instagram messages. It's really...
I really struggle with this because I think it's easier when you're a company. I think when you're a personal brand, I'm not with my personal brand. I'm not at the scale you are yet. So I'm very much like must respond to every DM and every comment. And I'm already struggling with that. So, Lord knows how many messages you must get. So I totally see it's necessary, but I struggle with that because I hate someone I look up to. If I message them and don't hear back, I judge them, even though I realize how busy they are. I secretly judge them.
Oh, of course, we all do it.
Yeah, it's terrible though, right?
Yeah, and I still struggle with it too. It's still not comfortable for me to have outsourced that, but it's getting better as time goes by. And I think what I realized is someone getting a response that is pretty much what I would say, and the end experience is basically the same. They got a response as opposed to hearing like radio silence, but seeing that like I read it and then them feeling like I'm a bad person.
And then if it's super personal, then I'm sure it might make it through to you anyway.
Of course. And Justin, what I was going to say, and this is just me, like what I think I'm going to do for next year is email's been really tough though, because they're longer form. Like it's not just like a little message. And I've had a hard time writing scripts for emails. Obviously you can have like those like instant canned responses that you can send out for certain emails, but I've had a much harder time writing scripts for those because people could ask multiple questions in an email and it's just much harder to manage. I've been thinking about getting like a part-time assistant here, like in Detroit with me, who would come in 2 or 3 times a week and then like sit across from me like while I'm sketching or working and like talk with me and like be like, what do you want to say to this person? What do you want to say to this person? And that might be easier for me in the way that I work. So that's what I'm toying with doing for next year, but I haven't implemented it yet. That's the only way I've thought of so far that would make me feel comfortable with someone else managing my inbox. I don't think I could.
We need to have this conversation. So happy.
Someone made a fantastic point and said, because email is instantaneous, so many people have an expectation that they'll get a response that same day and before that we had the postal service. I mean, to get a response in a week was an amazing luxury that someone sent you something in a week. And it's crazy how people can kind of, it's not that they're doing it, it's just the technology kind of implies it, that you feel like you have to respond so quickly to people. But with, I think, you having someone message for you, especially the fact that like you're saying it, for instance, like on a podcast like this, if you're saying, hey, I'm busy and I've custom wrote these. And when you say you made multiple responses to different things, it feels really handcrafted. Like, you can only do so much. And when you say it, you're like, well, yeah, she's not trying to hide it. She's not pretending that she's not doing this. She's telling everyone she's doing it. And she put a bunch of love into the way she made it. So what do you want?
Absolutely. And, what's helpful for me too is, and for anyone who's listening, I still will go through my inbox and I'll read the messages that I get. It's just not me responding. Like I still get all like the warm fuzzies from every nice thing that everyone says. And I genuinely, it's what I would write back. It's just, I don't have the bandwidth to personally write back anymore. And honestly, it's interesting how things like Instagram DM and Facebook Messenger have like changed communication, because if it's really important, I think people forget that you can send an email too. Like there are people I see on Instagram who in their like bio will say like no DMs, like email only, because
you can even block people from being able to DM you.
Really?
I'm sure, because I saw a guy and he literally stopped anyone being able to DM him and was like, email me.
Actually, yeah, I think you can turn messages off. I thought you meant blocking individual people from DMing you, but
well, you can do that too. But yeah,
for me, I was like, well, I could just turn it off and like done, like never have to deal with it. But I felt like it was a missed opportunity to like connect with people and to
interact.
Interact with people. And so
100%.
I just kind of had to figure out a way around that. Yeah.
But just quickly, I just want to say, I know that scary feeling about somebody, replying to your emails for you on your behalf. I actually recently hired somebody to do that for me. I was in exactly the same boat as you. I was petrified because I'm quite precious about my communication to my customers. I mean, to me, that's like, it's everything. It's your business, you know. And I got it. The reason why I'm telling you this is that there is hope because
thank you.
Because Julie, the girl she's not a girl, lady, whatever, that I hired, she is amazing. She's truly amazing, and she often actually responds better than I would have.
Wow.
Love
Is
that.
she a virtual assistant or like a personal assistant?
So I mean, I live in South Africa. She lives in America. So she literally has access to, I mean, obviously I have several emails. So she has access to the one that all my customers email me. And then she will send, we're still working out a system that it works 100%. But at the moment, I'm blind ceasing her on tricky ones so that she can see how I'm responding. So we're like kind of at the training phase.
Yep.
And then ones where she feels confident in actually replying that I don't even have to get involved in. I mean, her response is amazing. So it can work. It can work, definitely. So don't give up. Definitely do it. It'll save you so much time.
Yeah, it's been interesting, like from a as a creative person who didn't go to business school and art school does not prepare you for all of those like systems and stuff.
Not at all.
It's been interesting trying to figure out ways to like what the most efficient way to deal with like those tasks are. Like I'm in the process too of, I get so many emails from students who want to do interviews with me for their school papers, and it's really sweet and I'm so flattered. I just can't answer the same 10 questions to everybody over and over again. So I made an FAQ page, and it's a lot easier to send people to one resource than it is to individually respond to things. I'm also
Does that mean we have to throw away the canned questions, Lauren? So tell me, what inspires you, and how did you get into design in the first place, Lauren? Please elaborate.
Oh my goodness. It's.
But seriously,
that would be a perfect.
Yeah, tell us.
But I mean, that would be a perfect email for somebody else to deal with. Lauren's put together some FAQ, and hop over there to have a look, and she loves reading your emails and blah blah blah. I mean, it's
absolutely
doable.
Lauren, are you okay on time?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So, I can see how popular your Passion to Paid course is. And obviously, I'm not going to be like, can you share every detail of this elaborate course now? But given that a lot of the listeners, that's a dream of theirs. They've never been paid for their work. They're putting it out on social media, etc. They're developing somewhat of a style. Beyond what we've talked about already in this episode, if you were to condense that course into like a bite-sized nice package, as we've talked about, what would like the key overall
like
steps?
A Costco sample.
Exactly. A delicious little snack.
Okay. The snack-sized version of Passion to Paid. Passion to Paid was the very first like online course I ever taught. I had been doing lettering workshops for about 1.5 years, and then I started teaching an in-person like lettering plus social media like workshop, and then it kind of evolved into, I was going to just make a lettering class to put online, and maybe this is my imposter syndrome showing right here. I was like, well, there are so many other lettering classes out there, and like there are other letterers, like, John Contino has a class, like Jessica Hish has Skillshare classes. Like, why would anyone take mine? So like, I shouldn't make one. Like, I don't think I should. So I was like, what can I do that's different than lettering? And I realized that creative marketing was another one of my strong suits. So I put together Passion to Paid, and what it is a step-by-step breakdown of how I like ideate and come up with a concept, and then how I brand my project. So finding a name, picking out the website, like building the little microsite. And then it goes into like how I launch my projects. So, how I start my projects out, how I announce them to my social media networks, how I reach out for press on design blogs, how I reach out to others to collaborate on a guest post and like market that way. And then it goes into, so that's idea, and then there's marketing, idea and creation, marketing, and then there's the paid part, which is I do like a business basics week where we go over, okay, so once you've made your project and you've sent it out there and now it's circulating around the internet, you're probably going to start getting like an inquiry or two about, hey, can you make that for me? Or can I hire you for this? How do you handle that? So it's basically an outline of, you know, how to communicate with clients, how to like project manage, how to price your work, how to, you know, invoice, how to read contracts, all that stuff. It's an overview. It's not like this all intensive. Once you're done, you can run like a full business. But I wanted to set someone up if they had no knowledge of how to freelance. They would feel comfortable if they got an inquiry and they would know how to handle it and not how not to like, you know, get taken advantage of, or just so you feel equipped to talk like a professional, even though you're totally like, you don't feel that way. And then we finish off the class with kind of, that's actually this week right now is the last week of Passion to Paid. So I'll be talking about this with my students tonight, kind of how to like wrap it up, like how to end your project if you don't want to continue your project after a year or two, how to apply to award shows, like how to keep the momentum going, and then like basically like segue into your next passion project whenever that may be. So it's the entire lifespan of how you come up with the idea to like how you get paid for it and then go on to the next thing.
I love it.
Sounds amazing.
Sorry, Dustin, just quickly, this popped in my head. You're literally like a more creative, kind of more hip Marie Forleo, if you know her.
I love Marie Forleo's stuff. That I'm honored.
There's a lot of
Thank you.
similarities though, in terms of how you're like branding and marketing yourself. And yeah, I like it. I'm a fan too.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing
Dustin.
anyone's ever said to me.
It's a testimonial right there. Dustin, go ahead, man.
Mine was very much related. I was going to say that I think what makes you stand out in many ways is that a lot of people have aspirations to do the things you're saying. In fact, I've taught a couple courses at some workshops on it, and you find that a lot of people, they will 90% want to do it, maybe 10%, 5% actually ship the project out the door and do it. You do that. So I'm curious, why do you think that is? Were you raised in a family where it was emphasized that you complete things, or did a certain course or book impact you? Or why do you think you are who you are in that particular aspect?
I think that a lot of that comes from my background in advertising and in like art school. So the advertising program, I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York, and you know, it was just, I don't know what it was. Our environment and our teachers just kind of put us through school with the mentality that, you know, you have to work really hard. You need to complete these projects to put in your portfolio so you can get a job, and getting a job is hard. And at the agency too, you know, even though I was only there for a short amount of time, what you realize is, oh, like we're working on all these different projects at once. They all have different deadlines. And like, especially if it's, you know, a print ad or it's something that needs to run like for the Olympics, whatever it may be, there are very real deadlines where whether it's done or not, it's going to ship. Like it doesn't matter. And so I think that, yeah, my schooling and then like my year at the agency, very deadline oriented, and not that the quality of the work didn't matter, but they were just, you know, portfolio is due on this date at this time, and then the doors close, or like, you know, production needs this file by this time, or, you know, that's all it is. They're going to use what they have. And I don't know where it comes from. I'm trying to like dig deep in my memory about like my childhood and like my upbringing, but my deepest satisfaction with the advertising world, actually, the job, yes, it was stressful. There were lots of late nights. I was not working on like the most creative stuff, but it really wasn't the worst. The thing that really like hurt me deep in my soul was the fact that after almost a year at the agency, we had pitched so many ideas and worked on so many campaigns and done all these things, like put our blood, sweat, and tears into these projects and these ideas. And the client just had the ability to be like, actually, we're going to go in a different direction, or, you know, we're actually going to kill this project, or your concept like was good and we're going to produce.
Terrible.
Yeah. Like we wrote some, we wrote some radio commercials that were going to be like, I think aired on like, I forget what it was. It was for the NFL, and we had wrote these commercials for radio, and the client loved them so much that they actually like produced them in the recording studio, and then they just pulled the plug. You know, they never actually.
It's very fickle. You don't think of the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into it, right?
Exactly. And so for me, it would be like doing all this work and then having nothing to show for it. I think that there was a big disconnect for me, because in art school, when you're a student, you can make whatever project you want for whatever client you want and just slap the logo on there and put it in your portfolio. And it's amazing. And now I have this weird respect for even like really shitty ads, because I'm like, oh my gosh, they sold it through. That's amazing.
They made it.
I
remember looking back at school, Lauren, and you ever do those tests
true.
where it tells you what you are going to be when you're older?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And mine kicked out as graphic designer and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow,
I remember
specific.
thinking, I'm going to go into advertising. That sounds really cool. And then a teacher grabbed me and was like, you do realize that the client can throw your work out, like you just talked about, and they can like destroy it and just say no. And you kind of have to almost be like a performing monkey for them to some extent. And I was like, well, I really hate being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I get to like advertise other people's stuff, but on my terms. So it kind of fit. But I completely resonate. Like what you just talked about is why I kind of sidestepped that industry a bit.
Oh, 100%.
For all the benefits and upside, you know, it sounds incredibly interesting and amazing. But that one thing would kind of stick badly for me.
For sure. Yeah, it wasn't the best fit for me, because I do find so much satisfaction in the completion of a project, and then, you know, seeing the project in its intended like use. Like if it's going to be a magazine cover, I love seeing the actual magazine, and I love knowing that it's being out in the world and it's being used. I think there's something hard for me when it comes to, I put in all this work and I made this thing, and now, you know, it's all for nothing almost. Like, can I even put it in my portfolio? And at that same time, when I was going through that crisis at the agency, being like, wait, I've been here for almost a year. I have nothing to put in my portfolio. Am I going to get fired? And we even checked in with our creative director, and we were like, are we doing okay? Like, we haven't produced anything like for our team in this year. Like, and he's like, it just happens. It's fine. Like, you guys are doing great. And I was like, I don't want to do this for 5 more years. Like, this is not going to feel good. And at that same time, though, I had done Daily Dishonesty. I had done Ex-Boyfriend Tears. And I was like, wait, if I make my own work, I can have an idea, I can make it, I have the skills to make it, and then I can ship it, and it's done, and it's like out in the world. Like, I can oversee the entire process. Why am I not doing more of that? And so I definitely gravitated way towards that. Because there is something about the completion of a project. So me liking completion, coupled with like that urgency of deadlines that I was kind of raised with in school and in the agency, I think, Dustin, is where I get that from. I'd say that 90% of my projects, personal projects that I make, when I have the idea for it. So, you know, for example, the idea for Daily Dishonesty came to me when I was just smashed with my best friend at our apartment, and we were talking about. We were shitting. We were like talking about all of the things we wanted to do that year and how we were going to be better people. And we were going to start a baking blog, and I was going to go to yoga every day, and she was going to learn how to bake croissants, and just all of these grand plans. And we spit out our wine laughing halfway through the conversation, because we were like, yeah, we're not going to do any of this. And that moment of like the idea inception, like light bulb moment. And I was like, wait, I lie to myself all the time about all these other things, like innocently, like I'm not like lying about, I didn't like commit identity fraud or something. And so I wrote them down, and then that's how Daily Dishonesty was started. I tend to start projects within a week or two of the idea being like having that light bulb moment, because for me, the momentum and the excitement is what pushes it through. When you let something kind of like marinate and sit for too long, and it gets stale. And I think that kind of momentum.
Do you have friends, Lauren, where they have these ideas, but they don't execute on it in the same way, because you almost want to grab it yourself, because they have this great idea and then sit on it, and it's like, just give it to me because I want to run with it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I do. And, you know, like I was talking with a friend the other night, some people get frustrated with that, and it doesn't necessarily frustrate me, because I think that I like hearing my friends talk about their ideas too. It's up to them if they want to do them. I just know that for myself, that momentum is very fleeting and very powerful. And if I don't execute it, pretty soon, I know that I have a million other things running in the background that will take over eventually. So for me, that's very precious. Same with Ex-Boyfriend Tears. I had the idea at work. I was still at the agency. And I literally went home and made the logo and started researching how to get flasks produced within, and I had everything done within 2 weeks.
I love that.
Wow.
I have to, sorry, Dustin, Lauren's like, there's so much here. You're literally preaching my language. Final question, Dustin, I promise. With this, it sounds like you've been remarkably consistent with the successes. But as we're the Honest Designers show, are there like 17 Ex-Boyfriend Tears projects sat there that didn't work
happen.
out?
I've never worked on a passion project that I never like. I've never worked on an idea and then been like, no, I'm going to scrap it. Usually, like, I'm very, very selective when it comes to what I actually...
Not scrapping it, but just it not kind of working out as a big success. I'm trying to... Basically, I want you to make me feel better that you're fallible after all, Lauren.
Well, so yeah, that's the thing too. I mean, I actually will talk about this. So I had Daily Dishonesty, Ex-Boyfriend Tears, We'll Let Her for Lunch, like 3 successful projects in a row. And so I was kind of on, feeling at the top of the world. And my 4th project, I made this project. You've probably never heard about it because it was not successful. I did this project called Wiggy Banks, and what it came from was my roommate and I had like old pasta sauce jar or something in our apartment that we would throw our spare change into when we came home, like at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people have their coin jar, their change pan, or whatever it is. And we counted it, counted it one day, and we thought there was going to be like $20-$30 in there because you really have no sense of how much money is in it. And we had almost $200, and we were like, whoa, wow, this is amazing. We could do so much. Like, this is real money. And then we, again, had kind of a realization where we were like, we're probably just going to spend this on like beer and like cheese and like dumb stuff. We weren't going to actually invest in anything or like do something smart with it. So I made this series of jars. I went to the thrift store and I bought, 10 of these just glass jars, and I was writing on them, instead of like, rainy day fund or like college fund, I would write funny things on them, like, travel and snacks or weed and Doritos, or like things that people would actually buy, like who were my age. I think I was 24 at the time. And
I saw that. That was so good.
I made them. I hired a friend to photograph them. Like, I got a website up. I used Big Cartel to like set up a little store. I figured out how I was going to ship them, and I had the whole like shebang ready to go. And I launched the project, and I sent it out for press, and no one thought it was as good as I thought it was. And I was really bummed. Like, it really didn't get any traction online. I posted them to my Instagram, and people liked them. They were funny, but they weren't that smash success that I thought they would be. Even though I had used my skill set, drawn from a relatable place, it was authentic. Like, it really checked all those boxes. There's no guarantee that your project is going to be a success. But I will say this is what I tell all my students. If you create from those places and you check all those boxes, the worst case scenario is that you have like a badass portfolio piece.
Yep.
And it can live in your portfolio for as long as you want it to. And so that's what I did. I think I only sold half of them. I ended up giving the other half away. And I just took the photographs that my friend took and put them in my portfolio, and there it sat. And so I thought it was like a failure. So compared to everything else, kind of a failure. It didn't like bomb, but it just didn't do anything. It didn't hurt my brand. It just was pretty neutral. And I put it in my portfolio, and nothing really happened until 3 months ago. A social media agency reached out, and they were doing this campaign with Bank of America. And they were like, hey, we saw your WikiBank project in your portfolio, and it's actually perfect. We're doing this campaign about spending and budgeting for millennials. Can we hire you to make 4 of those like for our campaign? And I was like, yeah, definitely. And
weren't you just like, I knew I was a genius. Like, I knew people just didn't know.
So the moral of the story is you've never failed. That makes me feel so bitter.
No, please. But what I'm trying to say is,
and it still worked out great, and not just great, but Bank of America great.
It worked out great.
I mean, that is amazing for the record.
3.5 years later, and that's what I tell my students too. Is, of course, all of us are used to, like, all of us are used to like instant stuff now, like 2-day shipping or like instant delivery and like instant this. When it comes to your personal work, my agent came up with this really great like metaphor. And he was like, you know, it's because we were talking about the Bank of America project and how it's incredible that who would have known that 3.5 years later, it would have actually, you know, done something. Yes, of course. And, you know, I really only put about 2 weeks of work into it, like on the side. It wasn't like I spent a year working on this masterpiece and it failed. Passion projects don't have to be so daunting. They can be just a small, you know, a silly little idea. Doesn't have to take a lot of time. That's one thing I actually tell all of my students when it comes to figuring out what idea they're going to pursue, because you can only pursue really 1 or 2 at a time. Probably only one is more feasible. But, you know, it really helps even if you have this idea that you love. If it's not feasible with your schedule, it's not going to get done. Like if you have this grand plan to make these giant wire sculptures and you want to produce, you know, 1 a day, it's just not going to happen. And like Dustin, you said you have kids, or like some people are busier, some people, you know, travel, you have to work around your lifestyle as well. It can't be like, I have to make this idea. And then you realize that, you know, a week into it, you can't keep up. There's nothing worse than that. So I always recommend that. But my agent's metaphor was, you know, passion projects, it's like you're planting all these seeds in your career garden and you're just sowing these seeds and you water them, but you don't know, like they didn't come with like a package. You don't know when they're going to sprout. It could be in a week. It could be in 10 years. But all you know is that you're continuing to plant seeds and like tend to your garden and they sprout when they sprout. And I think that's kind cool. Of, yeah, I loved when he said that because it's very true. I've had various passion projects. They've all been like, it's true, Tom. I haven't had a project that's been like awful, but a lot of them have taken longer than I thought they would to gain any traction or see any actual client work from them. And I think that's one thing I would like want your readers to know too is, again, the long way is the shortcut. Like things are going to take time and you can't beat yourself up if your first project or your second project don't reach your expectations because the internet kind of has a mind of its own. And as long as you're making that authentic work that is smart and strategic and, you know, feels like you, that's all, you're just planting your seeds and they'll sprout when they sprout. And you just got to keep planting and you just got to keep working on your garden and eventually they will. I think that a lot of us, especially all of us who went freelance or who are still running our own businesses, like, I think even when we get kind of down on ourselves, we do kind of have this underlying like belief or like hope that like things will work out, like people will find us. And I don't think we would do it otherwise. It would be way too risky.
Yeah.
Well, I would think what's interesting is whether it's, you know, Bob Ewing, who has a little business, little compared to like, you know, Apple or something like that, called Inch by Inch, where he makes pins, like, or Aaron Draplin, when we had him on, he was talking about design, and he said something that very much reflects exactly what you said. Is he said, I just like making things where it's a physical thing that has some sort of utility, and it doesn't have to be a, you know, super elaborate utility, like you said. It can be a very humble utility that it has to it. And I remember someone telling me about how, like, when he made field notes, he said he or someone that had heard the story from him said he was sitting watching TV and he had like a corner cutter and he was cutting like the corners to make like little notebooks. And then he had a stamp for field notes and he put it on it. And I mean, that was it. It was just because he liked making a little tiny thing. And I guess that just reflected to me very much that you just seem to enjoy, cool, in 2 weeks I could make this physical little thing that's this artifact that I've made. And that is very so fulfilling to have it this thing you can touch and hold.
Oh yeah,
take absolutely. A picture of.
You know, even when you know, I wasn't happy. I feel like a lot of people like to work on a personal project when they're not satisfied with their client work, because then they have a little bit of you know, control over their creative process again. But you know, even now when I am happy with my client work and I love what I do, I still love to have my passion projects that I can work on, because I mean, my clients are still my clients. They still have final say. There's still, you know, a lot of jerking around that can happen. And I don't begrudge them for that. I understand that that's part of the package I signed up for as a freelancer. And, you know, doing commercial art is, of course, the client has last say. And I don't begrudge my clients for that, because I have my own stuff where I know that I am in the driver's seat and I can produce the kind of work that I want to produce. And it's kind of this really great, like, I guess, like full circle thing where I make the work that I love making and that brings me joy and that is funny to me, or just the stuff that I feel like I need to make. And I put it out there and it grows my following. It attracts people who like those things. And then it ultimately leads to more paid work in that kind of vein of work. And so it keeps me fulfilled. It keeps me, it keeps clients coming through. And it's just a cycle that I keep repeating over and over. And obviously, as I've gotten busier, it's been harder I feel like I launch 2 projects a year. And now that I'm busier, I'm like, well, maybe I should just do 1 a year, because you don't want to put too much on your plate either.
No.
But yeah, it really has been like, that is my marketing strategy, and it checks all those boxes. It keeps clients coming to me. It keeps me. I think the most important part is like, are you fulfilled as a creative person? Because once you're like, enthusiasm and like creativity and excitement tank is running low, like you can't work effectively. You can't work. You just don't want to do it. And that's when you fall into the rut, like Tom was talking about. Like, and I think one thing that's been helpful for me anytime I've fallen into like a bit of a slump is just knowing that like if I find an idea that excites me, I can pull myself out of that slump. But it is up to me to do a little bit of soul searching and figure out, what do I want to work on? And I think it's tough too, because I think a lot of my students, I never really thought I could teach a class on passion projects. And when I first launched Passion to Paid, I wasn't sure if anyone would sign up because it's so specific. And people, my fear was people would look at it and go, well, like I could just launch a passion project on my own. Like I don't need you to teach me how to do it. But I find that with freelancing and with passion projects, people always kind of romanticize them, because when you're working full time, you romanticize freelance because it's like this ultimate freedom. You have autonomy. But then on the other side of that, when you get to that and you have no constraints, like you also feel stressed out because there's no one telling you where to be, when to do things by. And so it's kind of ironic. But with passion projects, I think people ended up signing up for the class, and it's been popular because people are daunted by a passion project because they are in control of everything and they don't know how to manage it, and they don't know how to pick an idea or to organize their process. And it's been like an honor to be able to teach people how I do it and how I've self-managed and keep people accountable and, have that community. And I really never thought it was going to turn into the thing it turned into, or that I would like make a name for myself as like the passion project gal, but it's been fun.
Amazing.
Well, it reminds me of, have you guys ever seen that thing where they'll show like some cookie from like a baking website and like is all decorated elaborately to look like something, and then they show what the person made that like followed the instructions, and it just is like goops of like colored frosting and it doesn't look right.
Yeah, it's like Pinterest fails, or like there's a show on TV now called Nailed It that is exactly that, where they'll show you like a really fancy cake and then they'll have the contestants try to make it, and it's so funny.
Exactly. So like I feel like when you see yours, you're like, okay, like I could ask so many questions. How are you getting so many, good photographs of yourself? Who's doing that? How'd you find the person? How are you getting these pictures of this thing you made? Is that really your hand with like the picture of it, or did you just put it on top of it? I mean, I could keep going and going, literally like 20 minutes. I could probably ask you questions. So it's kind of like that. You're like, well, if I try to do this, it will look like that cookie that has all the frosting smeared all over it. So maybe you could just tell me like how to do these things. So I can totally understand why someone would dish out $10,000, or I'm just joking. You're probably not charging that much for the class, but whatever you're charging for it, I'm sure I'd be happy to dish it out to learn that. Like, how on earth do you do this?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, we could talk about this for another 3 hours. I feel like this is going to segue into a whole other episode. Maybe we'll do another episode in the future. But
if you're down for that, Lauren, I'd love to have you back on, because straight away I'm thinking one of my favorite guests. We said that with James Lewis recently. I feel like we're upping our game with the guests. There's been so much insight in this episode. And also, I'm pretty sure that you're a very, very distant second place to Aaron Draplin in terms of swearing. Like, unless we have, like, because everyone else has been pretty clean. And there's been a few, which I love, but he is a mile ahead of you. Unless we get Terrence and Phillip on the show, I don't think anyone's taken that crown off of him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I like to keep, I mean, in my like everyday life, I swear minimally, I would say, but I think it adds a little bit of a flavor to what you're saying. Sometimes it can really
an accent.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but what I was going to say too is, when it came to teaching, Passion to Paid turned into something that I didn't really think it was going to, and it's been great. And one thing I had always thought was, I'm just a freelancer. So I was talking with you a little bit earlier, Tom, about how I hired a business coach about 2 years ago, and she and I were traveling together. We were in this travel group, and I knew she was a marketing like business coach, but for other marketing business coaches. And she had approached me, and she was like, "Hey, I just noticed you have like a crap load of Instagram followers, and you're not selling any digital products or courses. Like, I think I could really help you in that area." And me at the time, I was like, well, I am freelancing and I'm making money that way. So like, I don't really know why I would need any other kind of product. Like, my Instagram is a funnel into my portfolio. Like, that's all I need it for. And she was like, no, like you could teach and you could sell other things. And I was like, well, I guess so. Like, I don't really know if it's going to work. I had never done that before. And it wasn't until we had worked together and then she helped me put together Passion to Paid. And, the most helpful part of having her was with like the actual marketing part, like writing an email sequence. Like, I had no idea about that kind of stuff. And now that I've like dabbled in that world, it's all really exciting. And it's interesting to see, again, in a non-sleazy way, like how to...
And it can be creative. I think that's what scares people off. Like, it's sleazy,
it doesn't
horrible
have to
business.
Be, so, yeah.
It can be an art form, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a great way too to, really be able to reach your audience and connect with people, to have them on a mailing list, or to reach them via email, because, you have a direct line of communication with them, as opposed to them coming to your website or even social media. There's no guarantee that they're going to see it. People still check their inboxes more often. And so we put that together, and it really changed my business. And this is 2 years ago. Like, I didn't really realize the value in having a diversified stream of incomes. I know that's like something that people talk about: diversify your investments and diversify this to mitigate risk, blah, blah, blah. And I think in my head, I just always thought my career was going to be just working for clients, doing freelance design. And now that I have multiple streams of income, it's really, I don't know. I was talking about this yesterday on the other podcast. I feel for the first time, I'm like running like my big girl business, and everything feels like it's finally calm. Like, I don't get that like freelance scare anymore about like, am I gonna eat next month? Like, and with client work, it can be unpredictable. Like, there could be a month where I make $20,000, and then there could be a month where I make $2,000 or $200 or nothing. And I think that I don't consider myself a control freak. I am pretty risk averse. So having that steady stream of income from courses that I'm doing now has helped to like alleviate any stress of having to like constantly be worrying about freelance work, or if I'm getting enough, or if it's going to be enough. And
the beauty is when that stuff covers your outgoings, so you're good every month, and then everything else is a bonus, right?
Absolutely. And it's allowed me to be more selective with the clients that I work with. I don't have to say yes to everything out of like fear that I'm not going to make enough money this month. And, on top of that, I think knowing that I am a little bit more in control of, my courses and the income from that. Obviously I can't control it completely. I'm selling to my audience. I still need to put there's still a lot of variable there. But with client work, in my experience, like, I have had a steady stream coming in for the last 5 years. I know that makes me sound like an asshole, but
no, not at all.
it is something that I don't have any control over. And it does, even though it's been steady, it definitely like spikes and then lulls and spikes and lulls. And I don't like that, not knowing, I suppose. So I was talking with like my class the other day, and I'm trying to encourage all these young designers to think of their freelance careers as not just doing client work and getting paid by clients anymore. You can teach workshops, you can teach courses, you can make physical products, you can make digital products. There's so much room for creativity and so much room for business, like in that space, that I don't think, at least coming out of school, I was not primed for that. I wasn't even aware of any of that coming out of school. And I wonder if art schools are doing anything differently now, but our school very much, like, the program was very much geared towards all of us getting full-time in-house studio or agency jobs. And I don't think that's the future of how people are going to be working, let alone how creative people are going to be working. I think that we're early adopters when it comes to, like, because we, like you were saying, you don't like when people tell you what to do. Like, we're rule breakers, and we don't like to if something doesn't feel right, because we're creative, we know that we can figure a way to not do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so true.
I was on a podcast just the other day and saying creatives, special graphic designers, or people that can understand digital work and work in digital, are almost in the perfect position to be those people to create their own little empires or little businesses with digital products and different things, because you're literally making that for clients all the time. And like now, like because you don't have to have a wide distribution network that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to create, you can totally do that. And it's almost like the vocabulary or linguistics around graphic design has to like almost alter, because I don't, look at your work or as you tell your story, think, oh, Lauren's a graphic designer. You think this is like a creative woman who is a creative entrepreneur, but does all sorts of things. Like you said, you're almost like a vendor in really interesting ideas or something, like, you know what I mean? Like it's very weird. It'd be very weird to call you a graphic designer to me.
An idea vendor. Yeah, it is interesting though, but kind of like you were saying though, it's almost, I don't think that ideas will ever go out of style. Like design trends come and go, but creativity at its core, like as a skill, like I think will always be valuable, and it's kind of timeless. What was I going to say? Shoot. I lost it. Sorry. What you were saying was so insightful. I was just so wrapped up in that.
Well, I think so much of what you've talked about, Lauren, fits into that, because you touched on algorithms before. They can and will fade away. Instagram will not be the place it is today in a couple of years. I predict the same thing that happened with Facebook. Organic reach will probably happen there. But what does remain is authenticity, and what does remain is ideas and all of the stuff that is very much kind of internal to you. That can transition to any platform or any medium, any product. That stuff's more enduring. And that's why we preach a lot of that stuff, that more holistic stuff on this show, because it's not a fleeting hack or strategy that, won't work in 6 months.
It's not. I mean, you could literally be like selling cookies or, dog poop cleaning services, and you would be killing it because you have such
weirdest examples to juxtapose that.
Yeah, I was trying to cover the entire spectrum there, but I mean, you would be killing it. You would be a six-figure doggy business because of the way that you package things. It's really such a brilliant. You have such a insightful, unique way of packaging whatever it is.
I'm just thinking of the person that would be passionate about that. It's like, well, I love design. What else? Oh yeah, picking up dog poop. Like, let's merge those two.
Hey, actually,
it'd be awesome if someone made a great business out of that, where it was just the most.
I would love it. Yeah, well, and I think creativity can do it for anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's room in the market for like a new kind of dog pooper scooper kind of thing. You never really know. I mean, product, like physical product wise, not in terms of like, like a design on a mug or something, but actual product design. Like a lot of those things were created from problems that people were solving in their own life. Like, I don't know, what was that movie Joy about the woman who made this, like the self-wringing mop? Like it was because she had mopped up water that had broken glass in it and couldn't wring it out with her hands. And so she made the self-wringing mop, and it's incredible. Or like,
I haven't seen that. Yeah.
So many of those like inventions that we kind of use every day or take for granted, I feel like the innovation was, hey, this is an issue, like when I use the old version of that product, or here's a problem that I'm going through, that how can I use creativity and design to make it better for myself, therefore making it better for everyone else going through that problem. Or like, what is that product, Poopery? Have you heard of that?
Yes. Oh my!
I love the video ad they did for that. That's advertising. Or, hold on, is this the same one where it has the unicorn?
That's the Squatty Potty.
that one of my favorite advertising examples.
You guys, I'm sorry we've been talking about poop so much in this episode. I love it though. I think it's great.
I think that's really made this a winner. No joke. I really.
Yeah, you know what? I would totally agree. And kind of back to the diversified income stream we were talking about. I remembered what I was going to say, and what I was going to say was, I've talked about this at a couple lectures I've given now and in my class, but one thing that really shifted my thinking in terms of just being a freelancer, once I saw what happened with Passion to Paid, I feel like when I first started freelancing, I had heard from friends that, there are clients out there, like at least from lettering, where you could make, because I realized that for branding and stuff, this is probably not a huge figure, but, someone was like, there are people out there who make $10,000, $20,000, per project. And I was like, wow, that'd be amazing, like to get paid that much someday. And I think it's very daunting for a young designer to think about like, how can I land one of those projects? But if you flip it around, it seems intimidating to land a $10,000 project when you're starting out. However, even like not when you're starting out, anytime, like it's still a pretty big number. Yeah. But when it comes to flipping that around, and if you think, okay, well, $10,000 for one project versus what if I sell, $100 courses or products, that seems a lot more feasible to sell a larger quantity of smaller increments than it does to get that one big lump sum. And so that's what I've been kind of explaining it to my students, is that I had always looked at my Instagram and my work and my passion projects as, how can I use this platform and these projects to get more client work? And I was always thinking that the value in my Instagram audience was that art directors and people at brands were following me who could then hire me for work. But then I realized that even if people love my work, they might not have a project for me next month or the month after that, or even next year. They just like my work and maybe want to hire me. And it's still good to be on that list of people that, they want to work with. But I was neglecting the rest of my audience, which is probably 90% of it, of people who like what I do and want to learn how to do that. And once I realized that, I was like, whoa, there are actually two sides of this audience where, I always thought that people who liked my work, who weren't working at brands or agencies, like were, I don't want to say useless, but I wasn't focusing on serving them. I was focusing on trying to serve big name clients who had bigger budgets.
You probably thought you get a few heart likes on Instagram and that's it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's good to have.
Can't pay the bills with likes.
You cannot you can't pay the bills with likes. But if it's a mix of making authentic work, but then being consistent, kind of like what you were saying, Dustin, about actually following through, thinking about the idea, making it, but not just doing one project and then calling it a day. It's like being a one-hit wonder. Like your career is going to span a very, very long time. So you got to keep the momentum going and you got to keep it up. And the only reason I have been able to teach at the scale I think that I teach at is because I've put in 6 years of work into making these projects, building my portfolio, writing blog posts, giving like advice to my audience, and showing up and doing my thing. Like, it's not that someone could create an Instagram account tomorrow, like, and be like, buy my course or like buy my product. Like, it doesn't work that way.
No.
Yeah.
Actually, can we touch on that super quick? Because
of course,
this is something I'm teaching to my followers a lot. I hate how quick people try and close their audience. I think it's incredibly short-term thinking. I think what people tend to do is, I'm going to help you out, but I know that my hourly rate is this, and so I deserve that money from you straight away. No one's kind of willing to give anything away, to share that value up front with a kind of overall look. Like, I believe in the long term it pays off. I believe in the karma of business, and that's not to say undervalue yourself or anything like that. But I really believe when you try and provide for your audience and look out for them, years down the line, it comes back in a positive way. And I see it over 100%. And over and over again when people are just trying to like extract instant cash, or the second they hit 10,000 followers, they're like sponsored by Skinny Tea or whatever. Like that stuff just kills me. And
the day that you see me posting with my Skinny Tea, like
you're getting unfollowed, Lauren.
Put me out of my misery. Just put me out. Oh my gosh.
But you know what I do love is one of my favorite takeaways from this is you multiple times have mentioned that you'll come up with an idea and it takes 2 weeks. You're like, I did this in 2 weeks. That means you came up with the idea. You spent some free time, putting your lettering onto the jars. You hired a photographer. You sent it off to people and got done. 2 weeks. And I mean, at that rate, just imagine, let's say you do that, once a quarter. So 4 projects a year, you do that. These are all like, what's the word I'm looking for? They're prototypes for much bigger ideas. You can put that out, invest 2 weeks of your spare time in it, and you just need one a year to really have some moderate success. And then you've got like this thing. I can't imagine how satisfying it must be. You said you have multiple domains. how satisfying must it be to have these domains with these very compact
like
little projects. When you said that, I got this satisfaction inside. I was like, I bet sometimes she checks on them like her children and she's like, you're doing fine.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Like they are kind of like my babies. And yeah, I mean, 2 weeks is not, people are always like, oh my gosh, you got all that done in 2 weeks. But think about all of the time we like just like dick around or like waste in a 2 week span, like all the Instagram binges or, the Netflix binges or whatever it may be. People have more free time for the most part than they think they do. Obviously everyone's schedule fluctuates and is different, but I always tell people too, passion projects don't have to be expensive. They don't have to cost any upfront capital to make, other than, if you can, like the $10 or $15 for the domain. It's just your time. It's your dedication and your creativity and your skill set. But you don't need like cash upfront to make anything. And you also, depending on, like you were saying, with like Wiggy Banks, I did actually make those physical products in 2 weeks. Like I had a friend who was a photographer. I hired her to do that. It's not that hard to coordinate, especially when you're stoked about the idea. It's so much easier to work quickly when you are like jazzed about what you're working on.
Yeah,
you're not dragging your feet because you're like, this is so cool. I really want to make this happen as fast as possible. And that momentum is invaluable, I think. And there are other
the finish line is like so close. You keep that like powerful energy inside of you. Like around 3 months, you start to be like, is this ever going to get released? I'm so exhausted.
It's like the ultimate minimum viable product, right? We talked about this recently with like validating your ideas. I love what Dustin said about it being a prototype, because most people, I'm sorry, Lauren, aren't going to get 4 out of 4 success, which means that by putting out a bunch of stuff, I've got some people in my community who make physical gifts. And one of them, Rachel, I think she tried a few things. And then she started doing these Christmas tags where it was like hand lettering burnt into wood. And she starts getting orders in. But you never know which one is going to get traction.
Yep.
It's just a case of paying attention. It's like, oh, that one's kind of working. And then you kind of go all in on that and see where it leads, right?
Oh, of course.
But it's...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just going to say, it sounds like you've managed to find a way, because often people talk themselves out of doing something. So it's almost like you've managed to find a way to shut that part of your brain off and to just like, hey, I want to do this regardless, because if I actually stop and think about it, I'm probably not going to do it because I'm going to talk myself out of it, So I think a lot of people actually make a mistake. It sounds like you don't even stop to think. You just go.
Yeah, I think overthinking is definitely very prevalent, especially when it's your personal project. And especially if you come up with it and you're alone and you don't have anyone to kind of tell or bounce it off of. Like I think we have a tendency to overthink things, and then we poke holes in it that didn't even exist, at the beginning. And it is easy to talk yourself out of.
And
I think for me, I have been able to calm that because I trust myself more now. And also the whole reason, it's so nuts thinking about this, but the whole reason that I am a hand letterer now is because it's not because I was confident enough when I was younger. It's because I was naive enough to start a project and put it on the internet. I was 21 years old. I was still in college. I wasn't trying to be a letterer. I wanted to be in advertising. So I put zero pressure on myself. I never nitpicked my lettering for Daily Dishonesty because I didn't care. I just wanted the idea to be made and I wanted to put it out there. And I knew it wasn't the best, but I also didn't mind because I wasn't trying to be a hand letterer, and now I'm a hand letterer. And I think that I hope.
Me too.
Yeah, I like to share the story.
I feel like I've heard that in so many success stories. It's like an accident. No one goes in when they've got pretty much no experience and they're super naive. And, they're like, I've got a specific strategy for how I'm going to become a big deal in 3 years. Right. Every success story that I was just into it. I was having fun. And then it led somewhere, and you just happen to have enough acumen and creativity to carry that off.
Of course. And I think that's the thing too, is a lot of people drag their feet on starting a project or getting into freelance or building a business because they feel like this is very common for me. I was speaking with a woman a couple weeks ago when I was out in New York for a work thing, and she was asking me about how do you start an LLC? Like, how do you get a contract written? Like, how do you get your website up? And she had talked about it in the sense of, I'll start my business once I have everything figured out, once I have the grand roadmap. And I was like, that's not how it works. You start by starting and you flop and you figure it out as you go. Like, yes,
you're like, screw that. Give me 2 weeks in a jar. I'm good.
It's literally the price of admittance, though. I mean, the price of admittance is to fail, be embarrassed, waste money.
It's so true. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I tell this story to my students, but I started freelancing while I was in school doing just graphic design because freshman year of college, I was working as a hostess at a nightclub and also as a sales girl at Lush, that like handmade cosmetics store.
Oh, I love Lush.
So I was
Smells great.
Oh, smells so good. I was working part-time while going to school. And I was like, this is great. I'm going to school and I'm also making money. And I've always prided myself on being able to support myself and like generate income. I worked all throughout high school. I think I've always had a entrepreneurial and like business like streak in me. I don't know where that comes from, but yeah, sophomore year of college, I remember coming back to school and realizing that everyone's work was getting better than mine was. And I thought about it and I was like, wait, I moved 3,000 miles away to go to art school to be an art director or a designer. And I'm spending 25 hours a week, like walking people to their bottle service tables and like selling soap. Like my goals, like what I say I want, and like, even though I'm in school, like what I say I want and what I'm doing are not aligned. And I need to kind of get back on track. So I quit both of my jobs and I was like, well, shit, I still have to make money. So I made a resolution to myself that day. I was like, okay, from now on, any income that I generate is going to be using the skills that I want to get paid for someday and like build a career around. So I kid you not, I went on Craigslist because that's where I had found my like hostessing job. And I looked around for graphic design gigs and like freelance stuff. And I was taking anything and everything I could get. It wasn't good work. It didn't pay well. I think I was charging like $10 an hour. It was really bad. But every project, I learned a little bit more about how to talk with clients, how to like, set expectations, like set a timeline, send an invoice, like all of these skills that people are waiting for someone to teach them or waiting for a resource to give to them before they start. It just doesn't work that way. You just have to start. Yeah. And honestly, for me, kind of like with that momentum thing I was talking about, Dustin, I need like a little bit of pressure, like a deadline or an incentive to actually get my butt up and like do something. Like I wouldn't have researched all that stuff about how to run a freelance business had I not had to send an invoice in like 45 minutes.
Just in time and green.
Yeah. And I think that's why deadlines are really important with work too. Like, because, I'm a super procrastinator. If it makes anyone who's listening feel better, I like wait for some reason. Whether you give me 2 days or 2 months, it'll get done in the final hours. And I just need that motivation. And I think, that's why passion projects can be hard too, because you are the one who is setting the deadline. And you also know that you can kind of like have some wiggle room. So whether you need, a class or like an accountability partner or something, if motivation on your own is not enough, I think that seeking out, again, outsourcing, like finding people who can help you, like stay accountable and stay on track is super helpful. But yeah, I mean, when I think back to how I started freelancing, it was not glamorous and it was not fun, but I knew what I wanted. And I think it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier on, Tom. Like people say that they want to freelance or they want to work for these kinds of clients. It seems like such a big dream. It helps, and it's very daunting. I think it helps when it's not helpful if you look at that dream and then get overwhelmed by it and then don't do anything. Inaction is never helpful. But if you break it down into like all the small steps that would need to happen and just take even smaller steps towards each of those small steps, that's how eventually I think everyone builds their career. No one goes into it with the roadmap or the game plan completely laid out. Because it's also, I heard this from Tina Roth Eisenberg. I was reading an interview that she did, and she said something that was so profound to me. She was talking about how, especially as creatives, like we're very, very hard to please, but when we set big goals, and we finally achieve them 5 or 10 years later, or even 3 years, 2 years later, it feels good for a little bit, but it never feels as satisfying as you thought it was going to feel when you achieve those big goals. And she said it's because she had read this somewhere, and it's such a good point. Like, what the goal, you are not the same person that you were when you set the goal. So your wants and needs have probably changed a lot in those 5 years. And so it's not that that goal is invalid anymore, but you're a different person. And if you had asked me what I thought I would be, what I wanted to achieve in 5 years when I just graduated college, so 2013, what I'm doing now is very, very different than what I ideally would have loved to be doing when I was 23, like what I thought I would be doing at 28. And then if you even go back further, I was reflecting on this the other day. When I was 18, if you had asked me what my dream was for 5 years down the road, it was not what I was doing 5 years later too. So I think that because we're human and we're always changing, setting those huge goals, it can be helpful to know where you want to go and like have an idea, but it's not good to get married to like a very specific outcome, because very, very rarely does it actually happen the way that you intended it to. And honestly, I'm really glad it didn't happen the way I intended it to. When I was 18, I thought I was going to be a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids by now, and that would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But
I saw that on a recent post of yours.
Yeah.
It was super authentic.
Well,
you're like, and 10 years on, it's pretty different.
It's so true. Like I grew up in a community where it was very conventional. Like women stayed home, men worked, and like you went to college basically to find a husband, and then you moved back to your hometown, and then you had a family. And that isn't a bad life. Like, had I not known my life now, I'm sure that would have been great. And it's just, it would have been different. I'm really happy with where I am now. And I'm sure I would have been happy back then too. But and then that didn't happen. And I went to art school. I thought for a long time, I thought I was going to be in science or something. I was a pretty smart student, and I ended up doing art instead. But yeah, and then I think about when I graduated, college, I wanted to be like a creative director wearing her like high heels and power suit, like walking around agencies in New York. And that didn't happen either. And I think being able to readjust and like be in tune with yourself and know like, hey, this isn't the right fit for me, or this isn't feeling good. How can I change that? And kind of being able to pivot and adapt is a really important skill that I don't know how you teach that to people, but I think that most of us who go freelance have a higher tolerance for those things. Even if we are risk averse and we're human and we want, our basic needs met. And I think that there's something about freelancing that is appealing to people. But those who ultimately decide to go into it, we do have a higher risk tolerance than we give ourselves credit for. And we are confident in our abilities.
There's that too.
There is that too.
Lauren,
yes, or we're crazy.
I would love to have you back on the show, and I feel we might have to, because I could legit keep chatting with you for 3 hours. I think this is easily going to be our longest episode. But
oh dear.
It's definitely one of my favorites. There's been so much value. So if you're up for coming back on the show, I'd love to extend the discussion in a follow-up episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. That would be great.
It'll be the sequel. We'll be like the Harry Potter series where we just keep coming out with new ones. We'll keep iterating on the same
Milk it for everything
conversation.
it's worth. Lauren Hom returns. We'll start planning it. Lauren, thank you so much for giving so much incredible advice and so much of yourself. Really, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah.
Where's the best place for all the listeners to come and find you online?
Ooh, you can find me online everywhere at HOM, except for Twitter. Twitter, I am HOM. So that's an easy one to remember. And then, you can find me at HOMsweethom.com. I always tell people it's like Home Sweet Home without the E's. And then people are like, wait, there's no E's. And so it's home, SWT, home. And I'm like, no, there's no E's in home. And
You're like, it'll pop up. It'll auto-populate and show you.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because if you go to Home Sweet Home on like HOME on Instagram and online, it's like a home goods like website, obviously.
They're getting a lot of confused letterers just hitting them up.
I know, and it's
They're like,
because
why are we getting all this traffic?
I feel like I kind of shot myself in the foot because my last name is pronounced Hom, and most people pronounce it home. I still respond to that, obviously, but yeah, you can find me Home Sweet Home everywhere on the internet. That's the best place.
Amazing. Thank you again, Lauren, and we look forward to having you back on.
Yeah, thanks.
Great.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes and now Spotify by searching for The Honest Designers Show. And remember, we're now on social media too, if you search for Honest Designers. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes, as this is one of the best ways for other designers to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.